Welcome to the Self-Sufficient You podcast. In this episode, I chat with Tauney Stinson, known as Forager Bee, who teaches us how to get started in foraging, what to look for, what to avoid, all to do it safely. All right, this was a pretty fun conversation. Let's get into it. Hi again, everyone. David here, your co-host of Self-Sufficient You and another Ask the Expert. Today, I'm delighted to have Tauney Stinson with us. Tauney is also known, around these parts anyway, as the Forager Bee. Welcome, Tauney. It's nice to see you.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
So, Forager Bee, obviously our conversation today is going to be about foraging, what it is, maybe how to go about it, how to do it safely, and maybe some of the rules of the road, for example. And I know you have some products that you're going to do a bit of a show and tell. So let's jump right into it. Tauney, I'm curious in terms of why maybe and how you got started into foraging.
So I got started into foraging when I was really young, mostly out of necessity. My dad was in a really bad accident about a year after we purchased our 100-acre farm, and my mom needed to take care of me and my sister, who was on the way. So she had sheep, chickens, ducks, pigs, and 100 acres to forage and grow food on, and we did it.
So maybe a bit out of necessity, a little bit?
A bit out of necessity, yeah. She always had a fair bit of trepidation about mushrooms and things like that. So I learned some berries and some plants and some herbal medicine from her very well. But when it came to mushrooms, there were two that she was comfortable with, and everything else she told me I had to do my own research with.
Right.
Yeah, and then during the pandemic, I realized that there was like a pretty serious need for some foraging education to go on. I never thought of myself as an expert, but I realized very quickly that I do have things to share with people that are important and necessary for their safety and for the planet.
So one of the big things about our community is obviously having a sufficient supply of safe and healthy food, because you never know, and also taking care of our health to prevent disease and avoid the medical system at all possible is another big pillar. So let's get into, and you started to talk about a little bit, how to get into foraging, but doing it safely, because it can be dangerous and you need to know what you're doing. And so how can someone get into it in a safe way?
So I would definitely recommend joining some forays in your area, finding a local forager who educates people and taking a group trip with them, taking online classes. There's a lot of really great ones that are available. Investing in some really good books. My library is probably like 60 books and growing now, and the information in those books is constantly changing. A book from the 1970s is not going to have the same species in it or the same information. Some things have been proven to be unsafe in terms of edibility that were previously thought to be safe. So investing in good books is very important, and up-to-date ones especially.
So I'm going to have to update my library card, maybe dust it off, and maybe return those books I haven't brought back from when I was 18. Okay, so okay, noted.
Now, most of them will give you amnesty. You won't have to pay all those fees.
Thank goodness. There's a statute of limitations, I'm sure, at the local library. So if you're going to go down a library or get any kind of books or any kind of resources, whether it's online, I'm going to assume that you're going to want something that is local to where you're going to be foraging, because obviously the climates and the types of food that you can forage is going to be different wherever you live, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry about the dogs going off.
Okay, no worries. It's all good. So you're in Eastern Ontario, right?
Yeah, I'm located in Renfrew, so I'm about an hour west of Ottawa.
Okay. So what are some maybe abundant or common things that you're finding in your neck of the woods?
Right now, the chanterelles are popping off like crazy. There are so many out there in the woods, and they're delicious, and they're just so good. And fairly easy for beginners to identify.
So if I'm cruising around the forest here after our conversation, how would I know what a chanterelle looks like?
Okay, well, I actually have some on hand. So pull out a nice big guy here for everyone at home. This one looks pretty good. Oh yeah, that one's perfect. All right. So firstly, they are apricot colored. They're kind
Oh,
of a
wow.
yellowy orange. They're beautiful. We have a few different species here, but in general, they're pretty much all yellow on the outside and white on the inside. When you look at their gills, I don't know if you'll be able to see this well
Yeah.
enough, but they have
Yeah.
forking gills. So not true gills like in a grocery store mushroom, but these kind of ridges that fork out about halfway up. And the ridges go down onto the stem as well. That's an important feature. They smell quite fruity. They're very pleasant. And when you break one open, it has kind of a string cheese kind of texture.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Fibrous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very fibrous. But when you cook them, you wouldn't notice that fibrousness at all. They're a very pleasant eating mushroom. Yeah, there are some lookalikes out there that you have to be aware of. In particular, the jack-o'-lantern mushroom, which grows on dead and decaying wood. It's the same color, up to bright orange, glows in the dark, which is very interesting, but has true gills that are separate from each other.
So the distinguishing factor between the safe, which is the chanterelles, and the I don't know, if jack-o'-lantern are poisonous or just not safe for human consumption, is the gills. That's the defining feature, right?
Yeah, the gills and their substrate. So the chanterelles will grow on the ground, sometimes out of very well decayed wood, but usually not directly out of wood. And the jack-o'-lantern grows out of stumps and things like that.
Does that apply to most edible mushrooms, where the edible ones are based on more on the ground and the not so safe ones are on trees, or is that just specific to that variety?
That is specific to those varieties. Yeah. So there are some very safe fungi that grow on trees, particularly things with pores. So polypore mushrooms that grow on wood are generally very safe. The thing that makes them inedible is just how tough they are.
Oh, okay. I see. Okay. And any other kinds of mushrooms that would be safe when you're foraging?
Another really easy to identify mushroom for beginners is another brightly colored one. And that's kind of a funny thing about mushrooms is like their color does not indicate how poisonous they are. It's kind of the opposite in a lot of the rest of the natural world. But lobster mushrooms are bright orange.
Wow,
And
look at
that is a really interesting one where it's actually two mushrooms in one. So the base species, the host species, is either a Lactarius or a Russula of varying edibility. Some of them are simply not edible when they're growing, but then it gets attacked by a secondary fungal infection called Hypomyces lactiflorum. And it'll take a white mushroom and turn it bright orange. It'll grow a crust on the outside. So this used to be a regular mushroom with gills that grew out of the ground, and then it got attacked by this fungus and became this orange misshapen lump.
So it's still edible?
It actually probably wasn't edible until it was infected.
Oh, so you're using words like attacked and infected, but in this case, it's actually a good thing. It made it edible.
Totally a good thing. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
It takes a mushroom from being inedible for humans to being totally edible and totally delicious.
Wow, that's really cool. And that thing looks really neat too. It's beautiful to look at. And what would that taste like? What kind of flavor profile would that have?
Well, like the name suggests, they have a kind of a seafoody taste and texture. So you can use it in pretty much any recipe that would call for shrimp or lobster. My favorite thing to do with it is to chop it up, cook it up, and then cool it and add mayonnaise, herbs, and lemon zest and put it in a East Coast style lobster roll.
Wow, that's cool.
Don't even miss the lobster. It's so good.
Certainly a lot cheaper.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love free food, that's for sure.
Who doesn't? Especially when it comes to mushrooms, particularly. I don't know. Well, I'm sure you do. You probably are aware of the medicinal benefits of mushrooms, right?
Yeah, they're full of complex polysaccharides that you can't get from anything else.
So not only is it cool and interesting and inexpensive, but mushrooms probably something we should be eating as part of a diet. Obviously, if we're finding them out in the forest in our yard, probably going to be safer than the ones we get at the grocery store that are more commercial.
Definitely. That being said, it is really important to make sure that when you're foraging, you're not picking from areas that used to be like industrial waste dumps, because mushrooms can pick up toxins, heavy metals in particular. They're being studied for eliminating heavy metals out of soil.
So yeah, they're like a filter. So you want to make sure that you're not eating something that's been near dumps or maybe even farmland, because I know some farmland heavy fertilizers, pesticides. So you got to be careful there.
For
So
sure.
what are some areas then to like? What are some safe practices? So obviously understanding where you are, like you just said. I guess some people aren't going to know what the history of under the ground could be. But I guess just knowing what's nearby, knowing the quality of the ground you're in is probably one of the safe, basic things to know. Anything else?
Absolutely. Also, just like legality, you are not allowed to forage on national or provincial parkland, but municipalities may have different rules. So it's good to look into that kind of thing. And if you can't find any municipal or public land to forage on, you can try looking up crown land in your area.
So you can't be trampling on your neighbor's yard, picking mushrooms, or in a provincial park. So there are some. Well, it sounds like there's some rules, but also respecting property is, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. What else can we forage out there, almost regardless of where we're living in Canada? There's some common things that anyone can find wherever they're living.
No, absolutely. Berries, raspberries, compound berries of any kind are always safe. So raspberries, blackberries, blackcap raspberries, golden raspberries, all of those things are safe. They have compound berries. They grow in a kind of a cup shape around a central spoke, and those are in the rose family, and everything in the rose family is technically edible.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, where we are these days near Georgian Bay, there's a lot of berry bushes, but I never know safe or not. So we don't bother.
Definitely do your research. There are a lot of invasive berries out there that are not safe for humans to eat. Birds can eat them, but don't take your edibility advice from birds or squirrels, especially not the squirrels. Squirrels do weird things. They're not to be trusted.
Yeah, we don't trust our squirrels or chipmunks. Nice to look at, but that's it.
Exactly.
What are some other things that we could find out there in the forest?
Let's see. Right now, choke cherries are ready. They make a great jam. You can make wine out of them. You can make like a syrup, quite pleasant. If you're into making wild syrups and you have a soda stream, you can make your own sodas. You can also ferment your own sodas using wild yeasts. That's always fun. Black walnut season is upon us. So there's two parts to black walnut season. At this point in the year, they're still soft enough to cut through with a knife. So they're ideal for making things like black walnut syrup or black walnut wine.
Wow.
I've also got a black walnut liqueur on the go that's very, very good.
I've never heard of black walnuts before. Are they literally black walnuts? Is that what they are?
Yeah, so it's a native species. It grows here. The eastern black walnut. They are really interesting. When you pick the fruit, they have an intense kind of citrusy scent. They also have the ability to kill all the plants that grow around them. So they put out something called juglone, and it kills everything in about a 30-foot radius. Some grass and things can hold on pretty well. Like I have one in my front yard. The grass is fine, but I can't grow a garden nearby to save my life.
Yeah, nasty little devils, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. But they do make tasty treats.
So yeah, with the black almond, so when you get it home, and I guess with anything that you're foraging, what are some I guess safe practices when you do bring them home in terms of just cleaning and prepping them?
Well, especially with black walnuts, they contain some serious dyes. I made the mistake of not wearing gloves on one hand when I was processing these, and my fingers were browner than a smoker's for weeks. I also got a little bit on one of my thumbnails, and it is still there. I can't get the color out of my nail. It's been over a month.
Wow, it's like beets, but worse.
Yeah, exactly. But you can use it to make hair dye. You can use it to make wood stain. There's all sorts of uses for black walnut beyond just eating it.
Wow. Yeah, I've never heard of black walnut before. It's interesting, and I didn't know that it grew in our area.
Totally does.
What does it look like? Same shape as an almond that most people would be familiar with. It's just that it's black, or does it have a different shape to it?
Well, on the tree they kind of look like green tennis balls.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They don't say Wilson on it though, right?
No, nothing like that.
How would someone say go about? Is it possible even to do some foraging, maybe in an urban area, whether someone lives like in a downtown condo or even in the suburbs somewhere? Is that something that's doable, possible?
Oh, absolutely. So I actually live right in town. And we have a fairly large lot for being in town, but it's blessed with a lot of edible things that I didn't plant here. There's two types of raspberries growing on my property. There's wild bee balm, like bergamot. Several different types of mushrooms grow under the trees. There's lactarius mushrooms. There's field mushrooms, shaggy parasols, all sorts of interesting things back there. Apples. I didn't plant any of these things. And then there's also some invasive weeds, some of which were originally planted here by the previous owners of the house, thinking that they were very pretty, like Japanese knotweed and goutweed, but they're also edible and totally delicious and even somewhat medicinal.
If someone's looking to maybe get started in foraging, do they need any kind of special equipment or special tools to do so?
It depends on what you're planning on foraging, but the most important thing is to make sure that you are safe. So covering yourself up against bugs, ticks, things like that. Nobody wants to get Lyme disease. It's a terrible experience. I haven't had it personally, but I know people that have, and it debilitates you long term, makes it hard for you to live your life.
No kidding. Yeah. And watch out for poison ivy, obviously.
I
Right.
am suffering right now. I went
Oh,
through
you
some the
are, eh?
last week knowingly. I knew I was going through it. I saw those lobster mushrooms on the other side of the patch and I didn't see a way around. So I went for it. And I came home and I washed my legs immediately with soap, as you're supposed to. And I guess I missed a couple spots because it is intense.
Obviously, protect yourself against the bugs because the deer flies and the black flies and mosquitoes are obviously always around. Protect yourself against ticks and poison ivy. I guess all you really need to have is maybe a small sharp knife and a
Yep.
bowl.
And a basket's a good idea too. A basket with a loosely woven bottom will allow spores from the mushrooms to drop out onto the forest floor and potentially create new patches of mushrooms in the future.
That's cool. It's a nice little tip.
Absolutely.
Oh, interesting. So you started to talk about some of the things that you make after you've done your foraging and you've cleaned them and prepped them in terms of just how you use them in meals. But I'm interested in terms of some of the other ways that you prep them and the different uses. You talked about your black walnut syrup, it was?
Yeah. So this is my first year making it. It can basically be used in any way that you would use maple syrup.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is a little bit intense though, so I feel like it will do well in like sauces and marinades and things like that to give kind of like a little bit of a kick.
And do you use your berries any specific way, or you're just eating them?
I throw them in. I go to the backyard and I just eat them by the handful at the moment, but I do freeze them and keep them for later. Sometimes I make jams if I find enough. I will be doing choke cherry jelly this year since there's such a huge amount of them ripening on the trees right now. I usually end up doing a bunch of extra things too, because I teach a course at Algonquin College and my students need to be able to taste these things. It is a wild edibles program, so they need to be able to taste some of these wild edible foods that won't be out for them to pick and experience by the time fall rolls around when we get together.
So which campus of Algonquin are you teaching this course?
That's at Pembroke.
Pembroke. Okay, so if someone wanted to get more information about that, it's the Algonquin College Pembroke Campus. And the course again is called?
It's wild edibles, but it's actually for the Outdoor Adventure Naturalist Program.
Okay, that sounds very interesting. Can foraging be done all 4 seasons, or is it mostly in the warmer months?
I would say it's mostly in the warmer months, but anytime from the time the snow melts until it snows again, you can find edible things. Even in the winter, there's some seeds and berries that persist some plants that will kick around for a bit longer. And then there's also some mushrooms that will hang on through the winter months and pop up during the warmer days. Like oyster mushrooms can fruit in the wintertime if the temperature is consistently above 2 degrees. And same with wood ear mushrooms. You can find those throughout the winter as well.
Okay. Are you finding that the supply out there is pretty abundant? Is it declining? Is it growing? What's your take on things?
I feel like it's pretty abundant. I don't think that there's enough for all of us to be out there foraging by any means. It's a good way to supplement your diet and get some natural foods in there, but I don't think that every person in this country would be able to go out and forage and for it to be sustainable.
Okay. Any last things that we need to know? Any tips that would be beneficial to those watching?
I would definitely say that if you're going to get into mushroom hunting, do your due diligence, do lots of research, always ask a professional before you try eating something or feeding it to your family. There was a TikToker last year who watched a video about chicken of the woods, which is a bright orange mushroom that grows on wood. And she mistook it for that jack-o'-lantern fungus we were talking about earlier and fed it to her whole family without IDing it with a professional. So she got quite sick. It's not going to kill you, but it'll make you wish you were dead.
Yeah, like how poisonous are some of these? Is it a case where you're just going to feel terrible for a few days, or could they be life-threatening?
We're pretty lucky here. There's only a few truly deadly mushrooms that grow in the area. But they are the ones that are the most innocuous looking. One of them is white and it looks like something from the grocery store, and one of them is brown and just, it's a little brown mushroom.
So, take a course or join a club and just basically educate yourself, and then just go out and start simple. Start with the easy stuff and see if you enjoy it, right? That's probably the best way for anyone to get started.
Absolutely. Stick to the easy, brightly colored ones. Learn to do a spore print. Get some good books. Ask a professional. These are very important tips for mushroom hunting.
Do you have any suggestions when it comes to, say, some books that are maybe some better than others to help people get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So the newest Audubon guide is quite good, but it doesn't tell people what's edible anymore. The old guide did tell you what was edible, but the pictures were terrible. So there's some trade-off there, but the new guide has great pictures. That in conjunction with an edible edible mushrooms book, and maybe the Mushrooms of Eastern Canada by George Barron. That is an excellent book, and it relies on spore prints. So you learn to do a spore print so that you can see what color the spores are that come out, and then you can identify your mushroom from there. So between those books, you'd have a pretty good library.
And you'd feel quite confident knowing that you're making a safe selection.
Absolutely.
Now, I have an app on my phone which will identify plants in my garden. Is there such a thing for foraging? Do you know?
So yes and no. I don't like using apps for identifying mushrooms in particular because a lot of mushrooms require taste tests or color change tests, or you have to cut their gills and see if milk comes out. And an app can't do these things for you. They won't even suggest it, but it'll make educated guesses that are sometimes terribly wrong. So stay away from apps for identifying mushrooms. It's a good place to start. I do recommend iNaturalist or Seek by iNaturalist for identifying plants, though I find that's pretty successful.
Okay. So for anyone in the Ottawa area or up the Ottawa River in Ottawa Valley, you're teaching a course at Algonquin at the Pembroke Campus, and that's starting in September?
Yeah, but I also teach private group lessons throughout the season.
How can people find you online if they want more information?
On Facebook, you can find me at Forager Bee, or on Instagram, you can find me at Tauney.
Okay. Any last words for us, Tauney?
Be safe out there, guys. That's the main thing. Make smart choices.
Yeah. And if you've always maybe considered or wondered about foraging, maybe go out in your front or backyard and see what may be around. But first of all, get a few good books and do it safely, right? Just before you get started.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Tauney, thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. Great to hear some of your wisdom and experience with foraging, and maybe this has inspired a few more people to get out there and take up a new hobby or to get started on something they've always maybe wondered about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Hopefully, again, we'll talk to you soon and get an update on how things are going.
Sounds good. Look forward to it.
Thanks.